Hey pal, you just blowing from Stupid Town?
Now, I won't lie, when I first found out that Colin Kaepernick was sitting in protest of the national anthem, I said, oh, here we go. This Cho doesn't get it. He just doesn't get it.
Kind of like how you don't get it, as you're about to prove in this video.
And it wasn't even necessarily in direct reference to sitting down during the national anthem. It was more so the fact that I've always viewed him as kind of being a selfish, kind of me first type of guy. Is fair or not, that's the way he's always presented himself to me. That's kind of the aura that he emanates.
Well, that's his actual personality, not an aura. Only reason he pulled this national anthem sit down is because he pretty much lost his job to Blaine Gabbert, and he wanted an excuse so he can say, I didn't get cut because I sucked at my job. I got cut because I'm black, and they don't want black people speaking on those type of issues.
In my opinion. And I thought this would be a very selfish move. A selfish move that took away from the team. And at the end of the day, when you're a National Football League player, your responsibility is to yourself, granted, but also to your team. And at a time where you're in the preseason and you're trying to get yourself ready for the regular season under a new head coach, and you're not even your team's starting quarterback, mind you, doing something like this, you have to know the type of attention it's going to bring. That it can be viewed as a very selfish decision. In a lot of ways it is, and it could be an incredible distraction to the team because instead of talking about the upcoming season, instead of putting all the energy and effort and focus on the team's play on the football field and their work on the practice field and in the meeting rooms, we're going to be talking about Colin Kaepernick sitting during the national anthem.
This video is actually kind of past the whole national anthem sit down thing, so when I say certain things, it's going to be in the current state rather than talking about it in the past type of thing. But right now, we're still dealing with the Colin Kaepernick issue because he's a free agent right now, and unfortunately, every single sports page keeps bringing that person up because he's took a stand and he's black and they're trying to blackball him, yada yada yada, which they have no factual evidence to prove this. Yeah, we're still talking about this issue in May, and this free agent thing happened in the preseason, so it's been spanning a whole long time. And because of people like you, Schlegdaddy, and other people who want to keep crying wolf and playing this bull crap that's not true and not providing any sources, we're going to keep talking about him until he finds a team and finds a home as either a backup or a starting quarterback.
And teammates and coaches are going to have to sit there and answer questions, not about what's being done on the practice field or in the meeting rooms or on the field during preseason games. They're ultimately going to be answering questions about this. It could be an incredible distraction. An incredible distraction, and in some ways can be viewed as a very selfish maneuver by, in my opinion, sometimes a very selfish guy in Colin Kaepernick. Furthermore, when you look at it from a national anthem type of standpoint, the one thing, when you talk about sitting down during that anthem, you'll get those idiots like Tom Brenneman and all others talking about all these soldiers that are fighting for our freedoms. What fucking freedoms are they currently fighting for?
Well, for one, the freedom to act like a jackass like you're currently doing. But on a serious note, freedom of religion, that's an example I can think of. ISIS, they're trying to enter the United States, as they've said. They want to enter the United States and cause pretty huge amount of problems, religious-wise and other ways they want to do that. So that's one freedom. And in other Islamic countries where certain people don't have the freedom to drive, like women, or the freedom to wear any clothes, like women, those are freedoms that we're trying to fight, and we're trying to bring our way of freedom to those type of countries.
The answer is none. Shut the fuck up. But when you talk about not wanting to stand up during the national anthem because of the problems in society today, in particular when you're talking about police brutality that disproportionately affects young black males, which is a legitimate problem.
Yes, it's a problem, but a very small problem. Black on black crime is a way bigger problem than that. Fathers leaving the home is a way bigger problem than that. So, what about addressing those problems? The way bigger ones than the small one.
You also have to remember that there are many black soldiers that died fighting for and protecting that flag many of whom died for a country that did not love them, died for a country where they went over and in some cases killed other colored peoples to come back home and be viewed as a second-class citizen because they were indeed a colored person as well.
I'll give you this point, but you have to preface this. It has to be any war before 1980, because black people were fighting for the civil rights in the 1960s, and they got those rights passed through. And at least in the 1970s and 80s, for the most part, black people were seen as equal. Not all, because not all people are going to see blacks as equal, and that goes for any decade and anything in the future. So, yeah, you have to preference this.
And to me, you could look at it in one sense and say that him sitting down during the national anthem disrespects all of those black soldiers that fought for and died for that flag for a country that frankly doesn't love them, never has, and still doesn't, and I don't know if it ever fully truly will.
Bullshit. Please give a source where you get this information from. You know damn well that's bullshit. This country doesn't love black people. Kind of like how, most of the sports have a lot of pro-black players playing basketball, or they give a lot of black people opportunities, like passing those rights in the 60s that I previously just talked about. Yeah, they really don't like black people. They wouldn't pass those rights if they didn't like black people. So please provide sources where you say the whole country doesn't like black people. There are some people who won't, yes, but the whole country as a whole does not hate black people.
On top of all of that, I look at Colin Kaepernick kind of from a snarky kind of, smart-ass perspective, and I say, hey, you want to take a stand on anything? How about you play better? I mean, let's call it as we see it. This dude is losing out on the starting job to Blaine Gabbert. Let that sink in for a second. The dude has regressed so much and progressed so little over the past couple of years without Harbaugh there to kind of hold his damn hand that he can't even beat out Blaine Gabbert for the starting quarterback job of a crappy San Francisco 49ers team. If Colin Kaepernick, on the one hand, wants to take a stand on anything and wants to put his effort towards anything, why don't you be better at your job? Because at the end of the day, the amount of impact that your stand can have, the amount of power that your voice can carry, is directly in some ways related to your performance on the field, in your profession. You look at somebody like Colin Kaepernick, dude can't even start for his NFL team. A lot of people aren't going to take what he says very seriously. Fair or not, doesn't matter if he brings up fair points. If you can't be better at your job and you can't at least be the starting quarterback, knowing what comes with being a starting quarterback and that people naturally gravitate to you and pay attention to you, then why the hell are you worried about all this other crap? Be better at your job first, then everything else can fall into place. Then you can worry about everything else. When a LeBron James and a Dwayne Wade and a Chris Paul and a Carmelo Anthony sit there at the ESPYs and they do their whole little speech talking about the gun violence needs to stop and the inequity in the treatment of young black males by police officers needs to stop and all of this, they have a right to sit there and say that, yes, but furthermore, when they say it, people are actually going to take notice on a positive way because these guys are some of the best at what they do. LeBron James is arguably the best player in the world currently and one of the truly all-time greats. When a LeBron James says something, it means more than if a freaking scrub like Swaggy P says it.
I want to add something, though. Even if LeBron James was to say the same things that Colin Kaepernick is saying, he'd still be wrong, factually speaking. So it doesn't really matter the source of who's saying it. It matters if they're saying factually correct stuff. Just like to point that out.
Oh, y'all might love Swaggy P. We know it's true. Muhammad Ali, when he made his big stand in the 60s and in the 70s, it meant more because he was Muhammad fucking Ali. And he was arguably the greatest boxer of all time. Jim Brown, legendary woman beater, but also a legendary crusader when it comes to civil rights and different things. It meant more because it was Jim Brown, one of the greatest football players of all time. Part of the disappointment for many people when it came to Michael Jordan over the years and his lack of willingness to take a stand on political or potentially divisive issues was the fact that perhaps more than any person in history, up to and including Barack Obama, Michael Jordan had the ultimate outlet as a black male in this country and around the world to affect as much positive change as anybody. And again, I will emphasize anybody. And more often than not, he stood silent. He did nothing.
But here's something for consideration. Michael Jordan is not obligated to speak for anybody. He doesn't have the same issues, so to speak, as a younger black person would. And plus, he doesn't have to speak for a group. That's the main problem in the black community that's going on right now. Too many blacks are looking for a leader instead of doing stuff individually for themselves. If they would do stuff for themselves individually and worry about how they are individually, and then maybe think about certain things in a group situation like family, then the black community would be better off. But as long as they look to each other as a group, like Marxist ideology type of people, they're going to continue to not do anything, and they're going to continue to be bad and worse off because of it.
Because at the end of the day, Republicans buy sneakers too. But if a Michael Jordan said something, it means so much more because he was Michael Jordan. It's like when he finally said something about the police violence and talking about young black men killing each other and how it all needs to stop, and this is getting carried away. This is why the world went fucking crazy, because Michael Jordan actually took a stand and he said something that meant something for once. But if Michael Jordan was Randy Brown, nobody'd care. Nobody'd care. And at the end of the day, you know, while we live in a sensationalistic media environment, and during the preseason, they gave the media something to talk about to stem the tide until the regular season games started. And that's part of the reason we're talking about it. Frankly, that's part of the reason why I'm even here talking about it in a video. At the end of the day, it really doesn't matter if Kaepernick isn't better at his job. However, with that said, and all that other stuff kind of put out there, and I stand by everything I just said, I'm also going to stand by what I'm about to say. Because on so many different levels, I understand Kaepernick's protest, and I agree with Kaepernick's protest.
Of course you do. That's your whole MO, Schlegdaddy. You're a black apologist. You just take the black man's side for whatever reason. I don't know why you just think white people are so racist, but never point out the racism in black people. You're always saying how Republicans are racist and don't back up those claims with sources or anything. You just say it like it's true, but you never point out the racism in black people. You always point out the positives in black people, but never the negatives in black people. And you just, I don't know, it's your ideology, politically speaking. So continue to be a black apologist, as I'm going to have to point out in this video, because that's all you do is play this identity politics game.
And will defend not only his right to make this protest, but the reasons for which he is making this protest, because they're valid.
No, they're not.
You're talking about a country here, when we talk about the flag, a country that was built on slave labor, a country that was also built...
Do you have a source to prove this? Because that's actually incorrect. Not all the founding fathers owned slaves, you know that, right? And at the height of slavery, only around maybe 5 to 6% of Americans owned slaves. And even blacks owned slaves too. But nonetheless, 5 to 6% of the whole country. That's not a lot of people. So no, this statement is actually incorrect.
Largely on the backs of oppressing another colored peoples in terms of the Native Americans.
Incorrect again. For a person who likes to say that people use false narratives and propaganda, you sure are using a lot of propaganda and false narratives to prove some of your points. Anyway, to the Native American point, 95% of them died due to smallpox and diseases, not due to the white man's hand. So that's incorrect what you said. And I'm not going to say that all the Americans that came to this country were nice and pleasant, because some actually did kill Native Americans, but Native Americans also tried to kill them as well. And plus, colonization is a thing that always has happened in the past, so let's stop acting like this is only an American thing. Plus, once again, like I said, not all people were killing Native Americans due to the 95% thing I brought up. And none of this is a justification for what happened. I'm just explaining the facts here.
Who were ritualistically slaughtered, moved from their lands which they had first, because of manifest destiny and a bunch of other bullshit.
Not all Native Americans stayed in one place. Native Americans were hunter and gatherers. You know that, right? They followed the food. If the food was north, they would go north. If the food was west, they'd go west. They had territories and such that they put out in place, but those were with other Native Americans, who some of them also killed each other. So it wasn't a whole one body of Native Americans who owned the country.
Trail of Tears and all this other garbage, so that way we could store them on reservations. That's what this country's history is.
But is it only that history, or are you trying to make a narrative? I'm going to go with the second option I just said, because it's not only just that history. There's good and bad in American history, but you're only looking at the bad because that's the bullshit you like to do on this channel.
You have to understand that. It doesn't just get painted away with a white brush immediately, as much as white America likes to try and paint it away with their white brush.
And you like painting with a black brush, so to speak, because all the shit you're saying is just black apologist shit, and you're not even backing up what you're saying. You're just spouting off emotional bullshit.
This is a country built on slave labor and the oppression and murder of non-European colored peoples.
Not really, but keep telling yourself that, Schlegdaddy. Keep not putting sources and just keep yelling to make it sound like you're making a factual statement, even though you're not.
This is a country that counted blacks when it was formed as less than human.
I already know where he's about to go with this. He's going to talk about the 3/5 clause. But I bet you, matter of fact, scratch that, I know he doesn't know what he's talking about when he talks about the 3/5 clause. It wasn't to put forth so they can say, oh, we hate black people. It was put forth to stop the pro-slavery people from pushing forth delegates who wanted to count their slaves as whole people. The anti-slavery people didn't want the pro-slavery people to keep counting their slaves as whole people because they wanted to end slavery. But listen to Schlegdaddy. He knows what he's talking about. You know, he knows that James Wilson of Pennsylvania, who was anti-slavery, actually put forth a bill to try to stop slavery.
Less than human. What, 3/5 of a person or some crap like that? Counted them as property. It took 100 years and a civil war to kind of, sort of, get blacks equal rights, in which it really didn't happen. It took another 100 years for those legal protections to actually put in place to where they meant something when you talk about the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act and what have you in the 1960s. And even then we still have to wonder whether that really has truly made a difference, and I argue that it really hasn't. When you look at income inequality, when you look at the disparity in education quality between primarily white neighborhoods and primarily black neighborhoods, when you look at inequities in the criminal justice system, when you look at the inequities in terms of police treatment of white versus non-white offenders, it doesn't just carry over to young black males, even though they are more disproportionately affected than any other group.
He said a lot of points here, so it's important that I space out some of them for context. The income inequality thing, they still have access and they have equal opportunity to get the same income. So that's not a racist type of thing where the white man's holding the black people down. They have the opportunity to get the same income. The education point, more or less, that deals with politics. So if you have a Democratic person in charge, more than likely they're not going to advocate for school choice. For an example, Betsy DeVos is not a Democrat, or at least doesn't work with the Democrats. She advocates for school choice. Same thing as Michelle Rhee. They're both people who advocate for school choice, and most of the time Democrats do not advocate for school choice. They mostly advocate just to go to the very terrible and undereducated public schools. So that has to deal more with politics rather than race. But if you separate it into the race, the reason whites and blacks have the quote-unquote education inequality is because blacks keep electing Democrats while other races choose to look at the politics involved and they say, hey, I'm not going to go with the guy who keeps ruining us.
Not just them. You talk about police brutality and racial profiling and killings by police. These are all real substantive issues.
And if you actually take a look at the statistics, whites are actually worse off under police than blacks. Schlegdaddy doesn't really bring up any sources, but I will in the description.
And you've got so many people that want to sit there, especially in white America, and try to make it seem like it's better than it is by saying, well, we've gotten a lot better. We've got some work to do, but it's not going to happen overnight. But we're a better country than we were. What the fuck is that saying?
It says that we've come a long way from what we used to be. Back in the early 1900s, blacks couldn't get jobs equal to white people. Now they can. Back in the early 1900s, blacks weren't making enough money because they had restrictions on them. Like I said, the job discrimination, and they couldn't vote. Now they can vote, and they don't have that many restrictions on them, if any.
That's like saying, hey, this person's a murderer. This guy shot a couple of people, but he didn't end up killing anybody. He's better. Yeah,
That isn't like saying that at all, but nice straw man.
technically he's better. He didn't actually kill somebody. But if he could have, he would have. He tried to. He wanted to. He's an attempted murderer. How much fucking better is it really? It's like on a scale of 0 to 100 when you're talking about grading a term paper, let's say, or grading a homework assignment. The U.S. for many years was a 0. Then it was a 10, a 20, a 30, a 40. Maybe now we're in the 50s, low 60s.
Even though you're incorrect in your numbers and your stupid straw man argument, you just actually proved how we've gotten better. Let's use your straw man argument. If we were a 0 and now we're at 50, that shows improvement. Whether it's still an F, it's still an improvement from 0 to 50. But it's still wrong, but you've just shown that your argument was actually stupid.
It's still a D or an F, depending on how you want to look at it. We're so much better, okay? Well, what the fuck does that mean? We're still failing.
A failure compared to who? Like, put a source compared to the country that you're trying to compare us to. Economically, we're not doing as well as we should be doing, but we're still better than majority of the countries in the world. So please give an example of who we're not doing better than.
And we are failing. And it's encouraging for me to see when athletes like a Colin Kaepernick, along with others, start talking about these issues and bringing them to light.
So basically athletes that support your own false narrative, right? Because what about if they were white and they were saying the opposite, saying how Colin Kaepernick is lucky and privileged to be in the position that he is? I bet you wouldn't like it, though, because they're white and, they're not black.
They're understanding there is a responsibility, fair or not, that comes along with being a black athlete in this country. And it's nice to see athletes that choose to embrace that.
Once again, they don't have to speak out if they don't want to. They're not obligated to do anything.
Because it helps. It, at the end of the day, is not going to be some great agent of immediate change, but it can bring issues to light and maybe eventually get white America to care enough about it to where things will actually change.
It's funny that you, a white American, thinks that white America doesn't care about black Americans. Like, if they really didn't, they wouldn't have tried to put forth civil rights in the 1960s. If they really didn't, they wouldn't be an all-out people. There wouldn't be people marching for Black Lives Matter who are white. If they really didn't care, they would have just shut black people down and said, shut up and be lucky that you're in America. But instead, they're letting them have a voice. So your whole BS narrative is actually false.
When you look at what Kaepernick is doing, people always want us to talk about the Constitution and these different things. Understand that the First Amendment is not there to protect popular speech. It is there to protect unpopular speech, the dissenting voices, if you will.
Correct, but all of this has to do with the government. If the government shuts down your freedom of speech, the private sector is allowed to do what it wants. If the private sector wants you to shut up at your job, you have to shut up because the private sector can tell you to do that under the First Amendment.
Who was it? Thomas Jefferson, in all of his slave-owning, slave-raping greatness, said dissension is the greatest form of patriotism. So if we want to use the example of him for white America, the slave-owning rapist.
Only going to talk about the bad he's done? Maybe you're only going to do that to prove your narrative right? Because if you talk about the good and, some of the other feelings he had on slavery, while it might have contradicted him, he also was a very difficult man, so to speak. So stop just picking out bad and making that the whole picture when that's not the whole picture of Thomas Jefferson.
Ooh, like to impregnate his slaves, see Sally Hemings, it's a historical fact. If we go off of what he said, dissension is the greatest form of patriotism, then Colin Kaepernick is a true blue fucking red, white, and blue American patriot.
No, he's not. He hates the police. Remember when he wore the pig socks? And he apparently loved Fidel Castro, because remember he sent praises to him on Twitter and in his press conference. So yeah, no, he's not an American patriot, because Americans who actually know about Fidel Castro and know of the very terrible things he's done in this country don't love him. An American patriot wouldn't love someone who's an enemy against American ideology and American freedoms.
And for anybody to sit there, Fox News and the idiots on Fox News and other far-right sites in particular.
What about if someone is not on the far right? Maybe if they're on the center. What if they don't like Colin Kaepernick? Why is it always got to be Fox News? You always pull that bullshit where it's just hate on Fox News and hate on conservatives, yet you don't even know what a conservative is, as I'll prove later in my later videos. But back on topic, why is it always the right-wingers rather than someone in the center? They could probably be not liking Colin Kaepernick's antics too, because they're not well-meaning.
To sit there and say that he's un-American or he's unpatriotic. If anything, if you want to always talk that bullshit about the founding fathers, Thomas Jefferson saying dissension is the greatest form of patriotism, and they put in things like the First Amendment to protect things like unpopular speech, like what Colin Kaepernick is doing.
As I also said in the First Amendment, private sectors can allow speech that they want. The First Amendment isn't just for hate speech, as he's kind of talking about when he says unpopular speech, or that's what I think he's talking about. It's mainly to protect you from talking bad about the government. But like I said earlier, it's also the private sector's ability to allow whatever speech they want in their private sector.
He is more patriotic than any of you fucks could ever imagine to be.
No, he's not. I just talked about how he's not, and yelling does not make your point any more valid, as I've said before.
On top of that, from Colin Kaepernick's standpoint, why would you love a country and a flag that doesn't love you?
How doesn't this country love him? It allows him to be prosperous in this country. It allows him to be a rich guy who can say all this stupid stuff and not be put in jail or stoned to death. It allows him to make as much money as he possibly can due to opportunity. But, I guess that's bad in America. I guess countries that allow that, like us, are bad.
It doesn't matter if Barack Obama is in the White House.
It actually does, because it destroys that whole narrative that black people cannot prosper in this country.
Think about all the dirty, racist shit, frankly, that has been said about him the past 8 years.
That wasn't the attitude of the majority of Americans. They either went for his policies or they decided that they liked him and that his policies were suited for them. So the majority of Americans who were white did not hate Barack Obama due to his skin color. There were some, of course, but with every person, you're going to have people that hate you for your skin color. Kind of like with Donald Trump, how they keep calling him orange, and black people are doing that.
Think about some of the hatred that is out there. There was not nearly the same hatred of Bill Clinton in the 90s as there is for Barack Hussein Obama now.
Maybe that could be due to policies. And we can reverse the same thing. There's not as much love for Bill Clinton as there was for Obama.
And we know why there is more hatred for Barack Obama than there is Bill Clinton. Don't be fucking naive about this.
I'm glad you said it. It's due to his policies, because yes, there were people who hated on his skin color, but nowhere near the amount of people that hated on his policies.
At the end of the day, though, why would a black man like Colin Kaepernick sit there and love a country that doesn't love him? Sure, it's provided him the opportunity to play football and rip off the 49ers of a bunch of money.
That's actually proof that this country loves him. You know that, right?
So in some ways, hey, you could say he's just like an American CEO. He's getting paid a bunch of money and he sucks at his goddamn job.
And there's your jab at American CEOs that you like to do on Twitter and on YouTube. Can you give a number of CEOs that are actually doing bad in America? I would like the source for that, please, as I've asked for many times in this video.
But really, it doesn't change the fact that if he goes in his nice car with his money and he's playing his music and all of a sudden he goes driving through an all-white neighborhood, it doesn't mean that the racial profiling is going to stop, because all of a sudden, oh, he's a Negro with money. He's got to be a drug dealer or a pimp, or he had to steal the fucking shit somehow.
Because of the disproportionate amount of crime that black people are a part of, he's going to be looked at that way. It doesn't necessarily reflect that white Americans are racist. It's just that when black people are doing a whole bunch of crimes, you're going to look at them and think that some are actually going to be the ones that are capable of doing it in your neighborhood. It's unfortunate, yes, and it really shouldn't be happening, but it's going to happen.
At the end of the day, in this country, especially when we talk about the police system, it doesn't matter if you're a black man with money or not, you're still a black man, and that's a fact, Jack. And if that's uncomfortable for white America to deal with, that's just tough shit.
Well, in order for it to be uncomfortable for all white Americans, they would all have to be racist. But that's not true. And even you know it, so you really need to stop with this narrative.
Try living the life of a black man and see how you'd feel after that.
Well, since I am one, I can speak from personal experience, and I can say that this country has been great for the most part of my life. So, not all black people have the same experience. So please stop thinking this, because we're not all one person in a group.
On top of that, when we talk about the national anthem, looking past the flag and all of that, it's represented in terms of its oppressing and murdering of colored peoples and overthrowing democratically elected regimes to impose our own dictatorships around the world. See Iran and other places that are more U.S. friendly. You're talking about the national anthem, the Star-Spangled Banner, that was written by Francis Scott Key from Maryland, who, by the way, was a slave-owning white separatist.
Francis Scott Key has a very complex record on slavery through the research that I've done. Some show that he inherited his slaves, and some show that he purchased his slaves, but the remaining factor that's still shown is that he was very anti-slavery, even though it's kind of hypocritical. But still, he was very anti-slavery when it came to being outspoken about it. And the separatist issue only came up because he saw it as a solution to the whole slavery problem, not that he wanted blacks out of his country.
So the thing that people are pissed off that Colin Kaepernick doesn't stand up for was written by a slave-owning white separatist. Part of Francis Scott Key's whole work, talking about, fighting against slavery, was so that he can ship the slaves back to Africa.
I just pretty much talked about it, but once again, he wanted to move them as a better solution to the slavery problem. Not necessarily because he wanted to ship them off and say, fuck you, goodbye. But yeah, if I'm wrong, please provide a source.
This is this American white paintbrush revisionist history bullshit.
Is that all you say to information you don't like? That is whitewashing by Americans and especially the white man? Or can you just not take in that as a fact? And if it's not a fact, once again, provide a source.
That puts them in the category of Abraham Lincoln. We pretend these guys to be great because we feel guilty about just how terrible and shitty our history truly is.
That's not why we pretend, quote unquote, that these guys are great. We actually look at what they did in history, not just one side of it like you do. You look at everything bad and say that's what they are, bad. You don't look at anything good that they've done. Or you don't look at anything in general except for just the pro-black lies that you believe in, because most of it is not even helpful to blacks.
He was a slave owner. He was a white separatist. He wanted to ship the black man and woman back to Africa. Same shit Abraham Lincoln wanted to do until he had an epiphany late in his life around Civil War time.
From the accounts that I've read, it's more so to British Caribbean colonies, not Africa.
This is no hero. So this type of guy, in all of his flaws, writes this anthem, and now we expect black men like Colin Kaepernick to stand up for it? Why the fuck would he?
One, because it's not a representation of Francis Scott Key. When we stand up for the Star-Spangled Banner, we don't put our hands on our hearts for Francis Scott Key. We put it in for the message of the Star-Spangled Banner, what it's supposed to mean for every American.
When you look at this country's history, its present, and unfortunately its future, it's not easy to see why so many black men and women and other people of non-white European colors would sit there and be angry about what this country represents.
Asians do well in this country if we're talking about from an economic standpoint, and from a culture standpoint, and from a crime standpoint. So they're not doing particularly bad. Blacks, as I've pointed out, are doing bad mostly because of themselves, to be quite honest. And that pretty much leaves the Hispanics and Latinos. They're arguably as bad as blacks when it comes to crime statistics, but once again, they're not doing as horrible as you probably think. But just provide a source, as I'm going to continue to say all throughout this video.
And dislike what this country has done to its people. All of these people that are supposed to be given equal protections under the law, and they clearly are not.
Not for the reasons you think.
And you look at the 2016 presidential race, your two primary candidates are somebody in Hillary Clinton that if you or I did that, we're in prison. Can't get right. Always wrong. Only to flip-flop and get on the right side about 2 years too damn late. That's Hillary Clinton's political career in a fucking nutshell.
100% correct on this one. I have to point that out.
Versus Donald Trump, an overt racist and sexist.
I wouldn't technically call him a sexist since he seems to be douchey to everybody, but the racist thing is really getting old and has been used so much without any type of proof. He didn't say all Mexicans, and he didn't say anything bad about black people that isn't true. He said, what if you got to lose, which is true. They've been bad under Democrats. Why would they be doing worse when they've been bad their whole entire time? So I don't know anything racist about that.
I mean, these are the two primary choices. Like, how could you feel happy about voting for either one of these fucks? What the fuck, if you're a black man or woman or a Hispanic woman or your Middle Eastern descent, why the fuck would you vote for Donald Trump? And on a similar wavelength, why the fuck would you vote for Hillary Clinton? And these are the two choices that they have to make.
Well, you have to remember, everybody's an individual, and some people don't think as a group mentality. So there are going to be qualities that they like depending on the individual. So don't think that blacks, Hispanics, and Middle Easterns are one group that think the same way.
The two primary choices. Unless they educate themselves and they go look up a Gary Johnson or a Jill Stein or they vote for Mickey Mouse, all of whom are far more qualified candidates.
Well, if they did educate themselves, they would find out that all four have qualities that are bad. But Jill Stein and Gary Johnson are completely terrible. Gary Johnson's an idiot who's not really a libertarian, and Jill Stein's just a crazy nutcase.
These are the two primary choices that the country and the media are going to feed them. No wonder a black man like Colin Kaepernick might be a little upset about the way things are going in this country today. And you look at, again, the racial profiling that goes on in the police and criminal justice system, the violence towards blacks. While I talk about sometimes the sensationalism of every time a black man is killed by the cops and he's unarmed, it becomes this big, huge story. And it is a big, huge story. But let's not overlook the 10 or 15 other instances of crime where a black man kills another black man. This is still killing far more black men than the police could ever hope to.
Wait a minute. If you know all these black on black crime statistics, why are you trying to make the point that white people are oppressing blacks if you know that that's not true based on what you said about black on black crime? So you obviously know that what you're saying is wrong and you're still going to put it out there. But you still talk about the media pushing their false narratives.
But when you look at the bigger picture beyond that, and when you look at the quality of lives of many black and even non-black other minorities in this country, you can say it's slowly killing them day to day. The chemicals that are put in our food, the fact.
I hope you're not talking about GMOs because they've been proven not to be as dangerous as people thought.
That a black man is going to be more likely to be arrested for a drug offense, even though a lot more white people in a greater sense, not in a per capita sense, but in an overall number, are going to be actually selling and doing the drugs.
Notice that you had to change the number from per capita and disproportionate to just overall number because you know that white people outnumber black people in this country. So, of course, they're going to be a majority of the people that do drugs.
When you look at the length of sentences for black offenders versus white offenders, when you look at so many damn things, you could argue that this country is slowly trying to kill off its non-white European citizens, because it is.
I love how you say that like it's a fact, but you put no source in the description, which I keep asking for this whole video, and I know it's getting annoying, but still, you put forth no sources to prove your bullshit.
Because it is. You know, our private for-profit prison system is built on the incarceration of the young black male.
That makes it seem like it's an expectation for black people to be in prison. that means they need to stop doing the crimes then, and then they wouldn't end up in prison. Do you not see how that logic is faulty?
And that's a fact. That's a fact. So when you look at all of this, frankly, how could you not agree with Colin Kaepernick? How could you not stand with him in this protest? You know, all these far-right people and Fox News and everybody want to get all their panties in a bunch. They had to feel pretty fucking stupid when the hashtag Veterans for Kaepernick started trending a while back.
And you probably felt stupid when you found out blacks didn't like what Kaepernick had to say. So it's a double-edged sword type of thing.
You know, black soldiers talk about I was black before I went into the military. I'm black after I got out. And there's still these problems. You have all these white soldiers who are saying, you know, he's got the right to do this. You can sit there and cite this thing of fighting for our freedoms, but when a guy is exercising those freedoms that you claim that the military is currently fraudulently fighting for, you get all upset about it. No, he has the right to do it. And in a lot of ways, he's absolutely right to do it.
Nobody's hating his right to do it, even though constitutionally speaking, he doesn't really have the right to, because the private sector, as I pointed out before, they don't hate that. They hate what he has to say, because what he has to say is absolutely false.
Now, I wish he was better at his job, because it would mean more. It would carry so much more weight.
No, not really. It wouldn't carry that much more weight, because he's factually incorrect. That's just what you want.
I think maybe initially his message could have been a little more concentrated. It's like what happened kind of with Occupy Wall Street.
Occupy Wall Street wasn't a mess because of the message. It was a mess because of the people who were delivering the message. How they were not correct with what they were saying.
The original premise was good, but too many other things started to get into play, weren't looking at the bigger picture, and it ended up losing steam, and nothing fucking happened. Nothing changed.
I don't necessarily think anything was going to change, but, you know, since you're anti-CEO based on your Twitter and based on the stuff you say in videos, you would want it to change, but in actuality, it's not going to change just because you want it to.
So I'm with Colin Kaepernick on this 100%. I stand by his right to do this. Furthermore, I stand by the fundamental message that he's trying to get across. And I hope that more black athletes in the National Football League and across other sports decide to join him and do the same damn thing. Because when you look at the history of this country, when you look at the history of what the flag represents, and in particular, when you look at the history of the Star-Spangled Banner and the flag that it represents, and the man who wrote it and what he represented, why the fuck would anybody that's not white actually stand up for that piece of shit?
First off, it's only a piece of shit to someone like you because you don't understand America and you don't value America the same way most Americans who actually know the history do. And secondly, I've already talked about why someone would stand for the flag. So if you don't understand or don't remember, just go back in the video and you'll see what I said.
Why would they? So I hope he continues to do it. Yes, it's going to be selfish. Yes, it's going to be a distraction. Yes, in some ways it can be viewed as disrespecting dead black soldiers. But it has to be done.
No, it doesn't have to be done. But it's nice that he's doing it because someone like me or others can debunk what he's saying. And others have been debunking what he's saying. So that's the only good thing that's come from his stupid nonsense.
And the more people that take the courage to join up with this, the more this message gets across. And the more it becomes not just a Colin Kaepernick distraction, it becomes more of an overall distraction, which is a real positive thing and brings up an important narrative, an important discussion at a critically important time in our country.
We are already having this discussion. It really doesn't need to become a sports-wide issue. And that's what most of the fans are saying. That's why NFL's ratings are dropping. That's why ESPN's ratings are dropping. Nobody wants to hear this on a sports channel or when they're trying to escape from politics, because nobody wants to hear politics every day and all day.
Unfortunately, with that said, with the way white America has structured this country over the past 240 years.
Yes, let's keep attacking white America.
There are so many layers of white defense and white privilege in there. And again, these are facts.
Again, they're not facts. Let's stop with this whole bullshit because white privilege is not a thing.
These are. I don't have to quantify them. I shouldn't have to spell them out tangibly for you.
No, you shouldn't have to do that. But you know what you should do?
It should be easily understood. At the end of the day, there are so many layers of white protection and white privilege built into the system, that the genius of the white European in this country for 240 years is that the only way anything ever ultimately changes is as if the white man decides that it has to happen.
I don't really know where you get the idea that white people are dumb and smart at the same time, and that they thought, let's put a system together because of race. When they came to America, they weren't thinking about race. Only people like you are thinking about race.
You could talk about Malcolm X. You could talk about Dr. Martin Luther King and all of this and all that they stood for and all that they protested. At the end of the day, if it wasn't JFK and then later on, more importantly, LBJ, getting these civil rights acts and social reforms passed through, they don't happen.
Dwight D. Eisenhower was one of the main people trying to fight for civil rights, but, let's take that out because we don't want to give far-right people and Republicans any credit. But yeah, and also, Democrats were the main ones trying to fight civil rights, not Republicans. So that's another narrative that you're not trying to tell. Well, I shouldn't say narrative, I mean fact.
Barack Obama doesn't become president if enough white Americans aren't ultimately on board. Even if an overwhelming majority of black voters and Hispanic voters voted for him, he still had to get a certain percentage of the right type of white America to get on board with him in order for him to get where he wanted to get. That's the evil and the genius at the same time of what white America has done, the system that is in place.
It's sad that people like you think about politics in only a racial type of way, rather than think about it by going with what's the best idea and who has the best ideas.
You could have Colin Kaepernick, LeBron James, Michael Jordan, and thousands of other black athletes and influential black figures in this country and all throughout the world chime in and join up and protest something that is valid, protest something that should be protested, refuse to stand for something that they really shouldn't stand for, refuse to allow something that they shouldn't have to allow. But until more of white America gets on board, and until more of white America takes that message and runs with it, it's all going to be one gigantic circle jerk and waste of time. Nothing's going to fucking change.
It's not an accurate message, and I've given you statistics and sources to prove that.
So if anything, the flaw in Colin Kaepernick and his decision of what he did was the approach. He kind of, I think, took it on his own and did it himself. And again, I'm with him on it. I understand why. I don't disagree with him. Because for so many reasons, he's fucking right. But now is the opportunity and time to take a step back and say, hey, I need to get other people on board. If you start getting some of the white guys in the NFL and in the NBA and in Major League Baseball to take a similar type of stand, then potentially some progress can be made. Then the issue can really be taken to a whole different level. Because up until now and going forward, until unfortunately that happens, it's going to be much ado about nothing. It's going to be all this fuss about many valid things, and sadly, nothing is going to change. So for all the people that are pissed off about Colin Kaepernick and what he's done, okay, tough shit. He has the right to do it, and the fact is he is right. And if you were in his position as a young black man, with all the stuff that I've talked about in this video, why the fuck would you ever stand up for the Star-Spangled Banner?
I'm not rich, but as a black person in America, I don't share that story. I've been doing pretty good for my life. So he doesn't represent every black person, and he doesn't represent me as an individual.
Why the fuck would you ever stand up and salute that goddamn flag? Just think about that. I just hope Colin Kaepernick does a better job of networking, getting more people involved. I hope other athletes have the courage to join up in this cause. And I hope ultimately that he plays better, because if he doesn't play better, again, this is going to be one big circle jerk and it'll all be for naught.
Alright, that was part 1 of the Schlegdaddy destruction videos. I'm going to be making more, so don't worry about that. This is part 1, and like I said, is out of order, so none of these are going to be in specific order. Just whatever video I feel like getting to, I'm going to go and do.
Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up. Shut the fuck up.
Shut the fuck up.